The marble foyer echoed with laughter that cut like broken glass. My mother's hand, heavy with diamonds, waved the folded will like a trophy. "You'll never be Chloe," Evelyn Monroe said, her voice a silk-wrapped blade. "She's the daughter I actually wanted." My sister's laugh followed, high, cruel, and practiced. I gripped the crystal vase on the antique table, my fingers trembling. One moment of weakness. That's all it took. The vase slipped from my hands and shattered across the marble floor, sending fragments scattering like my dignity. Everyone froze. The household staff averted their eyes. My father continued, reading his newspaper, his jaw tight. Chloe's grin widened into something predatory. "How clumsy," my mother whispered, stepping over the glass without looking at me. "Some people are just born broken." That was the moment everything changed. Standing among the shards, I felt something inside me crystallize, not break, but transform. Not into anger, but into something far more dangerous. Clarity. My name is Cassidy Monroe. I'd spent 28 years trying to please a woman incapable of being pleased, competing with a sister who'd been groomed since birth to win, and waiting for a father too cowardly to intervene. That night, staring at my reflection in the broken glass, I made a vow that would reshape my entire existence. I would stop trying to be loved. Instead, I would become unforgettable. The Monroe family lived in a world of carefully maintained illusions. From the outside, we were perfection. Old money, older traditions, the kind of family that appeared in magazines wearing cashmere and secrets. From the inside, we were a masterclass in psychological warfare. Evelyn had always been a creature of control. She'd built an empire of influence through manipulation, and she'd transferred her expertise to Chloe like an heirloom. My father, Senator Richard Monroe, had simply learned to look away. His silence had become a weapon of its own, one that endorsed everything. I spent the next 3 months gathering intelligence with the precision of someone building a case. I attended family dinners, smiled through humiliations and watched, observed, documented. At the summer gala, Evelyn presented my volunteer work, the community center I'd built from nothing, as her own charitable vision. She stood in that champagne-soaked ballroom, basking in applause, while I held her clutch in the corner like a lady's maid. That's when I understood the real nature of power. It wasn't about being loud or angry. It was about having information no one else possessed and knowing exactly when to use it. That night, I accidentally knocked over a tray near a prominent socialite, one who'd recently been photographed leaving an abortion clinic. A whisper here, a connection there. Within weeks, she was suddenly uninvited from the circles that mattered. My mother had to publicly clarify that she'd never endorsed such recklessness. The thrill was intoxicating, but it was only the beginning. Uncle David had always been different from the rest of the Monroes. He lived in a brownstone in Manhattan that smelled of old books and better decisions, and he was one of the few people in the family who'd actually looked at me as if I existed. "Come over," he said during a phone call I wasn't supposed to be making. "I have something you need to see." His apartment was exactly as I remembered, all leather-bound first editions and whiskey older than I was. Uncle David poured 2 glasses without asking if I wanted one. "Your mother came to me 28 years ago," he began, his voice rough with something between regret and relief. "She was having an affair, multiple affairs. She wanted me to help her hide money, real money, Cassidy, millions. She was terrified your father would find out, that it would affect her social standing more than her marriage." He slid a folder across the mahogany desk. I opened it with hands that had stopped shaking. Inside were letters in my mother's handwriting, bank statements, receipts for hotel rooms in places she'd claimed to be at charity events. There were photographs, affidavits, 28 years of documented betrayal. Why? I whispered. "Because I was weak," Uncle David said. "I helped her hide it, but I never forgave myself. And when I saw what she was doing to you, the way she treated you like you were somehow responsible for her own moral failures, I couldn't stay silent anymore. He pushed another envelope toward me. These are copies. The originals are in a safe deposit box. But Cassidy, before you do anything with this information, I need you to understand something. He leaned forward, his eyes fierce with something that looked like protective rage. Once you use this, your life changes. Not your mother's life, yours. You'll be the one who destroyed the family narrative. You'll be the one people whisper about. Are you prepared for that? I thought about the vase, the will, the way my mother's smile never reached her eyes when she looked at me. Yes, I said. I'm prepared. For 6 weeks, I did nothing. This was the key to everything. While Chloe continued her reign as the golden child, confident in her untouchability, I transformed myself into something she never expected, patient. I moved out of the family estate and into a small apartment in the arts district. I kept my job as a nonprofit director, honest work that actually mattered. And I crafted my strategy with the precision of someone building a cathedral. The first domino was deliberate. At the annual spring gala benefiting the Children's Hospital, I positioned myself near a prominent gossip columnist. I couldn't help but overhear, I said softly, but Senator Monroe's been spending a lot of time at the Riverside Hotel. I wonder if he's having the same issues my mother has been having. You know, the affairs. I didn't confirm anything. I simply left the seed. Within days, speculation bloomed. Chloe called me, her voice tight with panic. What are you doing? I don't know what you mean, I said smoothly. Yes, you do. Mother's furious. She thinks Father's having an affair, but he's not. He's been meeting with lawyers. Cassidy, if this gets out. Then perhaps, I interrupted, people should learn to treat others with basic human decency. The line went quiet. I'm going to destroy you, Chloe whispered. No, I replied. I'm going to destroy you, but I'm going to do it so carefully that you'll never see it coming. You've spent your entire life assuming you were untouchable. Let me show you what it feels like to be invisible. I hung up. For the first time in my life, I felt the exquisite taste of control. I didn't release all the information at once. That would have been too simple, too obvious. Instead, I orchestrated a symphony of revelations, each perfectly timed to maximize impact. First, I sent an anonymous package to a financial journalist I knew. Inside were documents showing how my mother had been systematically transferring family assets into hidden accounts. The story ran in the New York Times with the headline, Old Money's Hidden Schemes, the Monroe Family Under Scrutiny. My father's political allies started distancing themselves overnight. You don't survive in politics when your wife is implicated in financial fraud. Next, I arranged a private meeting with the social director of the Metropolitan Club, a woman my mother had snubbed for years. I brought Uncle David with me. Together, we shared the full timeline of my mother's infidelities, her manipulation of the family narrative, and the systematic cruelty she'd inflicted on anyone who questioned her authority. The woman listened with the expression of someone watching justice arrive on schedule. Within a week, Evelyn Monroe was quietly asked to resign from every board she sat on. Health reasons, the announcement said. Everyone knew better. But the real destruction came at the family reunion. I'd rented the old Ashford estate for the occasion, neutral ground. Every Monroe within 100 miles was invited. I made sure the ballroom was perfect. Flowers from the garden, champagne chilling, the kind of setting my mother had always orchestrated herself. She arrived believing she still had control. Chloe arrived beside her, her perfect composure cracking slightly at the edges. My father arrived last, looking like a man who'd finally understood the cost of his silence. When everyone had gathered, I stood and clinked a glass. The room quieted with the kind of attention usually reserved for catastrophes. Thank you all for coming, I said, my voice steady and calm. I asked you here because I wanted to share something with our family, a story about truth. I gestured, and a screen descended from the ceiling. On it, I'd compiled everything, The bank statements, the letters, the photographs, the hotel receipts, the evidence of systematic asset fraud and serial infidelity spanning 3 decades. My mother's face went white. "This is illegal," she hissed. "This is documented." I said pleasantly, "Yes, which is why I've also sent copies to the FBI, the IRS, and the New York State Attorney General. Uncle David is here as a witness, along with the forensic accountant who verified every transaction." Chloe stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "You bitch. Do you understand what you've done? You've ruined this family." I looked at her, really looked at her, for perhaps the first time without the fog of envy. "No," I said quietly. "Our mother ruined this family the moment she decided that her power mattered more than her children. I'm simply making sure everyone knows it." My father rose slowly. For a moment, I thought he might defend my mother, might reclaim some last vestige of control. Instead, he walked directly to me and placed a hand on my shoulder. "Thank you," he whispered, and the broken sound of those 2 words undid something in me. The story broke within hours. Monroe family scandal. Senator's wife charged with financial crimes, the headline screamed. It consumed news cycles for weeks. My mother was eventually indicted. Her trial became the social event of the season, watching a woman who'd spent decades carefully curating her image watch that image incinerate on live television. Chloe attempted damage control. She granted interviews, claiming she was a victim of her mother's schemes, a pawn in her games. Nobody believed her. The evidence was too thorough, her participation too documented. She disappeared to a private treatment center in Switzerland, ostensibly for stress management. My father began the process of undoing his marriage, his political career already decimated by association. He moved into a small apartment in Brooklyn and started therapy. We never developed a particularly close relationship, but we developed something more valuable: honesty. "I was a coward," he told me over coffee 3 months later. "I chose comfort over courage every single day. I taught you that was acceptable, and I'm sorry." I didn't forgive him, not immediately, but I accepted his apology, which was more than he deserved. 6 months after the family reunion, I was sitting in my small apartment, surrounded by the kind of life I'd chosen rather than the one that had been imposed on me. The nonprofit work was fulfilling. I'd hired a staff I actually trusted. The community center I'd built was thriving. I thought about that moment with the vase, the glass shattering my mother's cold smile. For years, I'd believed that love would make me whole, that if I could just be good enough, smart enough, worthy enough, my mother would finally see me, finally choose me. What I'd learned instead was something far more valuable. I didn't need her to see me. I only needed to see myself. The revenge hadn't been about the exposure or the destruction. It had been about reclaiming my narrative from a woman who'd spent 28 years trying to write me out of the story entirely. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Congratulations on your nomination for the Community Service Award. You're going to change the world." It was from a woman at the hospital whose daughter had been helped by the center. A woman I'd never met. A stranger who'd taken the time to reach out because the work mattered. That, I realized, was the real victory. Not my mother's fall. Not Chloe's humiliation. Not even my father's redemption. It was this. The knowledge that I could build something beautiful and meaningful from my own strength, without anyone's permission or approval. The Monroe family estate was being converted into a historical landmark. I wasn't consulted about it, but I appreciated the poetry of it. My mother's carefully constructed world becoming a museum of her own hubris. Evelyn was serving a 3-year sentence. She'd be released in about 2 years, her fortune decimated by legal fees and restitution. Chloe had reinvented herself as a wellness influencer in Los Angeles, which I found deeply ironic. My father was writing a memoir about political corruption and moral failure. It was actually quite good, and I was standing in the newly renovated community center, watching children play in spaces that hadn't existed a year ago, spaces that would help them build better lives than the ones I'd almost accepted. A young woman approached me. Couldn't have been more than 16, with eyes that held that particular exhaustion of someone raised in a family that didn't quite know how to love her. "Are you Cassidy Monroe?" she asked. "The director?" "I am. I wanted to thank you. My mom said you were on the news last year for something about your family, but when I came here, you treated me like I mattered, like I was worth your time. I've never felt that before." I took her hand, this girl who reminded me so much of who I used to be. "You do matter," I told her. "Never let anyone convince you otherwise. Not your family, not society, not yourself. Your worth isn't determined by anyone else's love. It comes from inside you, and it's already there." She smiled, a real smile, not the forced one I'd spent years perfecting. "Thank you," she whispered. "You're welcome," I replied. As she walked away, I realized that this was the real transformation. Not becoming powerful enough to destroy those who'd hurt me, but becoming whole enough to heal those who were hurting. Revenge had freed me from my past, but kindness had freed me to my future, and that, I'd learned, was the only victory that actually mattered. For 28 years, I waited for someone else to tell me I mattered. I smiled when they hurt me. I apologized for their cruelty. I accepted invisibility as my inheritance. But that day, standing among broken glass and broken promises, I understood something that changed everything. My worth was never theirs to validate. It was mine to claim. Respect isn't negotiated at someone else's table. It's declared from your own strength. I learned that silence could be weaponized, but more importantly, that patience could be transformative. I didn't scream. I didn't rage. I documented. I strategized. I refused to let their narrative be the only story told. The power wasn't in the destruction. It was in reclaiming my own voice. Your boundaries aren't difficult. Your survival isn't difficult. You're not broken because they couldn't see your worth. If this story found you while someone was convincing you that you're the problem, I need you to know you're not. Subscribe and hit that notification bell for more stories about ordinary people who became extraordinary by refusing to accept the roles others wrote for them. Because your worth was never in question. It was only ever waiting for you to remember it. Now, go write your own ending.